Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today we dive into a fascinating story full of mysteries, where the survivor of 3 near-fatal accidents reveals a shocking prophecy that could change everything on August 23, 2024. Get ready, because this is a near-death experience you've never seen before, heard it before. But before we start, let us know in the comments which city you're watching us from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our incredible stories. Hello, my name is Atanasio Delgado. Today is August 20th, and I decided to share with you a story that completely changed my life and my perception of the world. It's not an easy story to tell, nor easy to believe, but it's the purest truth I've ever experienced. I was born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico, a fascinating city, full of contrasts, where the desert meets vibrant culture. Since I was a child, I have always been a cautious, methodical man. I liked to understand how things worked, to unravel the mysteries of the world around me. Little did I know that the biggest mystery I would face would be that of existence itself. My life has always been, let's say, interesting. I worked in different sectors, from mechanics to sales, always looking to learn something new. But what really defines my trajectory are not my jobs or material achievements. These are the 3 accidents that almost cost me my life. It may seem strange to talk about it so naturally, but after what I've experienced, death is no longer a taboo for me. She became an old acquaintance, a strict but fair teacher, and it was through her that I had the most extraordinary and transformative experience of my life. I know that many may doubt what I am going to tell you. If I hadn't experienced this myself, I would probably be skeptical. But I ask that you listen with an open heart. What I experienced goes beyond common understanding, transcends what we know as reality. I will share with you not only the details of the accidents, but mainly what happened during my last brush with death. It was a journey that took me beyond the limits of our physical world, an experience that showed me that there is so much more to existence than we can see or touch. This is not a story of horror or sadness. It is a story of revelation, of purpose, and above all of hope. Through her, I hope I can pass on some of the wisdom and love I received during my brief stay on the other side. So, if you are ready, I invite you to embark on this incredible journey with me. A journey that started here in Albuquerque, but that took me to places I never imagined existed. A journey that changed not only my life, but my understanding of what it means to truly live. It all started in June 1975. It was one of those typical summer days in Albuquerque, the scorching sun making the asphalt look like a shiny mirror. I had just bought my Ford Bronco, a rugged car that seemed perfect for New Mexico roads. I was proud of that acquisition, you know. It was as if that car represented a new phase in my life. That afternoon, I decided to take the Bronco for a spin. The road stretched out in front of me, a straight line cutting through the desert. Normally, I am a careful driver, always paying attention to every detail. But that day, for some reason, my mind was far away. Maybe it was the heat, or maybe it was fate preparing me for what was to come. Suddenly, without warning, I felt the steering wheel slip out of my hands. It was as if the car had a life of its own. In a matter of seconds, I completely lost control. The Bronco began to skid violently, and everything around me became a blur. What happened next seemed to happen in slow motion, although in reality it couldn't have lasted more than a few seconds. The car rolled over. I remember being thrown from side to side in the cabin, the seatbelt keeping me in place but barely containing the impact. The sound was deafening, metal twisting, glass shattering. It was like the world was falling apart around me. When the movement finally stopped, I found myself upside down, restrained by my seatbelt. The strong smell of gasoline invaded my nostrils, and panic began to take over me. But in the midst of the chaos, a voice in my head, calm, steady, told me to keep a cool head. With all the strength I could muster, I started kicking the windshield. Every movement was agony, my muscles protesting, my lungs burning with the effort. But I knew my life depended on it. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the glass gave way. I dragged myself out of the car, my arms and legs cutting themselves on the scattered shards of glass. When I finally managed to get away from the vehicle, I collapsed onto the dry desert floor. He was panting, sore, but alive. In that moment, lying there on the warm ground, looking up at the blue New Mexico sky, I felt immense gratitude for life. Only later, when I was rescued and taken to hospital, did I know how close I was to death. The doctor told me that if I had been trapped in the car for a few more hours, I would have drowned. Apparently, the canal where the car fell would be flooded the next morning. That first accident was an awakening for me. It was as if the universe was giving me a warning, showing me how fragile and precious life is. But at that time, I still didn't fully understand the message. I still didn't know that this was just the beginning of a much bigger journey. 3 years have passed since the Bronco accident. I had recovered physically, but the emotional scars remained. Still, life went on, and I tried to get back to my normal routine. It was in this context that my second encounter with death occurred. It was July 1978, another hot summer in Albuquerque. I had bought a Kawasaki 900, a powerful motorcycle that gave me a feeling of freedom that I hadn't felt in a long time. That afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. The road was clear, the wind was blowing in my face, and for a moment, I felt as if all the problems in the world were behind me. It was in this moment of euphoria that fate decided to intervene again. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, a 4-door Plymouth crossed my path. There was no time to react, to brake, to swerve. The collision was inevitable and brutal. The impact sent me flying like a rag doll. I remember seeing the sky and the ground alternate in my field of vision as my body rotated in the air. It was a surreal feeling, as if time had slowed down. I could feel every rotation, every moment suspended in the air. When I finally hit the ground, it was as if all the air had been forced from my lungs. The pain was indescribable, piercing every inch of my body. I could feel bones breaking, muscles tearing. The impact was so strong that I was thrown 91 feet, a distance the doctor later told me was almost miraculous to survive. The world around me turned into a blur of pain and darkness. Distant voices, sirens, the touch of hands trying to help me. Everything was mixed together in a confusion of sensations. Then darkness completely enveloped me. When I woke up, I was in a hospital, surrounded by doctors and nurses and hooked up to several machines that monitored my every heartbeat. The diagnosis was frightening. Multiple fractures throughout the body. My skull was cracked, my shoulders were shattered, my left arm was broken. My right femur was in such critical condition that it had to be reconstructed with a 9-inch metal plate and 14 screws. The recovery was long and painful. Every day was a battle against pain and discouragement. There were times when I wondered if I would ever have a normal life again. But something inside me, a strength I didn't know I had, pushed me to move forward. During this period of recovery, I began to reflect deeply on my life. 2 near-fatal accidents within 3 years. This could not be a mere coincidence. I felt like there was something more, some purpose behind it all. But what would it be? This question kept echoing in my mind in the years that followed. I didn't know it at the time, but the universe was preparing me for something much bigger, something that would challenge everything I believed I knew about life and death. We now come to the event that changed everything, the turning point in my journey. It was August 1981, and I was finally starting to feel normal again. The scars from the previous accidents were still there, both physical and emotional, but I had learned to live with them. I was rebuilding my life, step by step, day by day. That night, I was driving home after a long day at work. It was a night like any other, nothing special. The radio played softly, and I hummed distractedly as I drove. It was then that I felt something wrong with the steering wheel. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, perhaps a remnant of the trauma from previous accidents. But then, without warning, the steering rod broke completely. In an instant, I lost all control of the car. The vehicle left the road, skidding violently. I struggled to regain control, my heart beating so hard it felt like it was going to come out of my mouth. It was at that moment that I saw the lights approaching quickly. A truck was coming in the opposite direction, at high speed. The impact was devastating. The truck, whose driver was visibly drunk, hit my car head-on. The force of the collision was so great that I was thrown into the cabin. My head hit the door frame hard, and I felt a sharp pain spread through my body. At that moment, I felt the life drain from me. It was a strange feeling, like I was disconnecting from my own body. I heard the distant sound of sirens and voices, but it all seemed so far away, so unreal. And then, darkness enveloped me. I was later told that I was pronounced dead at the scene of the accident. My heart had stopped and there were no signs of breathing. But the paramedics, against all odds, managed to revive me. When I arrived at the hospital, I was already in a deep coma. Doctors didn't have much hope. I was placed in an iron lung to help with breathing and covered with a blanket of ice water to control my body temperature. My condition was critical, and the chances of survival were slim. But it was in this state, suspended between life and death, that I lived the most extraordinary experience of my life. An experience that challenged everything I believed I knew about reality, about life and death. As my body lay limp in the hospital bed, struggling to survive, my consciousness embarked on an incredible journey. A journey that took me beyond the limits of our physical world, beyond everything I knew or believed possible. What happened next is difficult to describe in words. How can we explain something that transcends our everyday reality? How can we translate into human language an experience that goes beyond what our senses can capture? But I'll try. I will share with you what I saw, what I felt, what I learned during my journey on the other side. Because what I experienced was not just a vision or a dream. It was real as the air we breathe, as tangible as the ground beneath our feet. And it was this experience that changed everything, that gave me a new purpose, a new understanding of life and the universe. An understanding that I believe is crucial not just for me, but for all of humanity. I remember the exact moment my consciousness detached from my body. It was as if a huge weight had been lifted from me. Suddenly there was no more pain, no more fear. Just a feeling of lightness and freedom that I had never experienced before. I found myself floating in a dark and seemingly endless tunnel. It was a strange sensation, as if I were being pulled by an irresistible force. There was no fear, just an intense curiosity and a deep peace that seemed to permeate my entire being. The tunnel seemed to have no end, but I didn't feel anxious or impatient. It was as if time had lost all meaning. I could have been in that tunnel for seconds or for centuries. It made no difference. As I walked further, I began to notice a light in the distance. It was faint at first, but it grew stronger and brighter. It wasn't a blinding or uncomfortable light. On the contrary, it was welcoming, inviting. I felt drawn to her, as if she were calling me. As I got closer to the light, the tunnel began to open. Suddenly I found myself in a completely different space. It was a room, if I can call it that, made entirely of light. The walls, if they existed at all, seemed to be made of luminous clouds. It was like being inside a dream, but so much more vivid and real than any dream I had ever had. In this environment, I felt completely at peace. There was no weight. There was no physical body as we know it. I was pure consciousness, pure energy. I could move with just my thoughts, floating in that ethereal space with a freedom I had never experienced in life. It was then that I noticed the presence. In the center of that room of light, there was an entity. I can't describe it in human terms. It had no defined shape. It was neither male nor female. It was simply light, but a light that radiated intelligence, love, and compassion. The feeling of being in the presence of this entity is something I will never forget. It was as if all the love in the universe was concentrated there. I felt completely welcomed, accepted, understood. All my flaws, all my mistakes, all my insecurities, none of it mattered. I was loved unconditionally. This light entity approached me. There were no words spoken, but somehow I could understand everything she wanted to communicate to me. It was a form of communication that went beyond language. It was pure thought, pure emotion. The first thing I felt from her was a slight disappointment. It wasn't a trial, far from it. It was more like the disappointment a parent feels when they see their child isn't living up to their full potential. I understood that somehow I had not made full use of the gifts given to me in life, my mind, my ability to learn, my desire to understand the world. But along with this disappointment also came a profound understanding. The entity showed me that there was still time, that I had an important purpose to fulfill. And that's when something incredible happened. The entity invited me on a journey. Not with words, but with a kind of mental invitation. I felt like I was about to receive valuable knowledge, something that would not only change my life, but could impact all of humanity. In the blink of an eye, or at least what seemed like a blink of an eye in that place where time didn't exist, we were transported to another place. A place that defied all human logic and understanding. A place I can only describe as a dimensionless library. It was the beginning of a journey that would change everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the purpose of our existence. A journey that would lead me to surprising discoveries and a revelation I could barely imagine. Imagine a place where all the knowledge of the universe is stored. A place that transcends space and time as we know them. This was where I found myself now, the dimensionless library. It was a vast, infinite space. The shelves stretched in all directions, up, down, side to side, with no end in sight. Every shelf was filled with books, scrolls, tablets, forms of information storage that went far beyond what we know in our physical world. At the center of this incredible space was something I can only describe as a cosmic computer terminal. But it was nothing like the computers we know. It was a pure interface of energy and light, which responded to my thoughts. The entity of light that guided me encouraged me to explore. I didn't know exactly what to look for, but every time a thought, question, or curiosity popped into my mind, the answer instantly appeared before me. It was as if knowledge of the universe was literally within reach of my thoughts. I started asking questions about life, about death, about the purpose of existence, and the answers came, not in words or images, but in deep understandings that were formed directly in my consciousness. I learned about the cyclical nature of the universe, about how everything is interconnected. I saw how every action, every thought, every choice we make has an impact on the whole. I understood that life does not end with physical death. It is just a transition to another state of being. Time seemed to not exist in that place. I could have spent minutes or millennia absorbing knowledge. There was no hunger, thirst, or tiredness, just an insatiable thirst to know more, to understand more. At one point, I felt like I was being guided to specific information. It was as if the library, or perhaps the light entity through it, wanted to show me something important, something I needed to know not just for myself, but to share with the world. It was then that I received the revelation that would change everything. Information so surprising, so impactful, that at first I had difficulty fully understanding its meaning. The revelation was about a future event, an event that would mark the beginning of a new era for humanity. On August 23, 2024, a spiritual portal would open on Earth. This portal would bring with it a profound change, a transformation that would affect every aspect of life on our planet. This opening of the portal would mark the beginning of a new spiritual cycle, an era of greater consciousness, of accelerated evolution for humanity, but also an era of great challenges and transformations. The library showed me visions of that future. I saw people awakening to new realities, developing abilities that today we would consider supernatural. I saw humanity facing immense challenges, but also finding innovative and transformative solutions. I understood that this knowledge was given to me for a purpose. I was to prepare myself and help prepare others for what was to come. That was my mission, the reason I had survived so many brushes with death. As I absorbed this revelation, I felt a growing urgency, an understanding that my time in that library was coming to an end. There was so much more I wanted to know, so many questions still unanswered, but I knew somehow that I had received exactly what I needed. Then I heard a voice in my mind, not an audible voice but a clear understanding, telling me that the library was about to close. It was time to go back. I left the library building, if I can call it that, and waited. I expected the light entity to return, but instead, I felt a force pulling me back. Suddenly, I was in that dark tunnel again, but now moving in the opposite direction, back to the world I knew. The journey back was quick. In an instant, I felt myself being pulled back into my body. The transition was abrupt and, I must admit, a little painful. Suddenly, all the lightness and peace I had experienced was replaced by the pain and heaviness of my physical body. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the hospital, surrounded by machines, surprised doctors and nurses. I had returned. Opening my eyes back in the hospital was like emerging from a deep dream. The fluorescent light was blinding. The sounds of the machines and the doctors' voices seemed deafening after the serene silence of the dimensionless library. The first thing I felt was pain, an intense pain that seemed to run through every inch of my body. After experiencing the lightness and peace on the other side, returning to a broken and bruised body was almost unbearable. The doctors were in shock. From what I was told later, I had been in a coma for weeks. My vital signs were so weak they feared I wouldn't survive the night. My sudden awakening was something they couldn't explain medically. I tried to speak, to tell her what I had experienced, but my throat was dry and my voice wouldn't come out. A nurse gently asked me to stay calm, saying I needed to rest. But how could I rest? How could I just close my eyes and sleep after what I had experienced? The days that followed were a blur of medical exams, visits from family and friends, and frustrated attempts to explain what had happened to me. Every time I tried to talk about the dimensionless library, about the light entity, about the knowledge I had received, I was met with looks of concern or skepticism. Doctors attributed my hallucinations to the lack of oxygen to the brain during the accident. My family, although relieved to see me alive, seemed uncomfortable when I mentioned my experience. Little by little, I learned to keep these memories to myself. But they were there, vivid and real. As I recovered physically, I started to notice something strange. Information that I didn't remember learning began to surface in my mind. Complex concepts of quantum physics, advanced philosophical theories, knowledge about the nature of reality that went far beyond what I had ever studied. It was as if the dimensionless library had left an indelible mark on my consciousness. The knowledge I absorbed there continued to unfold in my mind, revealing itself little by little, like a book whose pages are slowly turning. And then there was the revelation about August 23, 2024. The date was burned into my mind like a fiery seal. I knew something monumental would happen that day, something that would change the course of humanity. But how could I share this information without sounding crazy? As my physical recovery progressed, a sense of urgency and purpose grew within me. I had been sent back for a reason. The knowledge I received wasn't just for me. It was to be shared, to help prepare people for what was to come. But I also knew I needed to be careful. The world was not ready to receive all this information at once. I would need to find a way to share this knowledge gradually, in a way that people could understand and accept. When I was finally released from the hospital, I was a changed man. Not just because of the physical scars of the accident, but because of the profound transformation that had occurred in my consciousness. I saw the world with new eyes now. Every person I met, every situation I experienced, everything seemed to have a deeper meaning, a connection to something greater. I knew the path ahead of me would not be easy. There was a lot of work to be done, a lot of preparation for what was to come. But for the first time in my life, I felt truly alive, truly connected to my purpose. The journey that began with that accident was far from over. In fact, I felt like she was just getting started, and I was ready to face the challenges ahead, armed with the knowledge and understanding I had received from the other side. The months that followed my return were a period of intense reflection and adaptation. Returning to normal life after such a profound and transformative experience, was not easy. It was as if I was living in two worlds at once. The physical world that everyone knew and the spiritual world that I had glimpsed. One of the biggest difficulties I faced was dealing with the disbelief of the people around me. When I tried to share my experience, I was often met with skepticism or concern. Some thought I was suffering from some kind of psychological trauma due to the accident. Others simply dismissed my story as the product of an overactive imagination or hallucinations caused by medication. This lack of understanding was frustrating and, at times, painful. I knew that what I had experienced was real, more real than anything I had ever experienced before. But how can we prove something that transcends our physical reality? At the same time, I struggled to integrate the knowledge I had received into my everyday life. The information I absorbed in the dimensionless library continued to reveal itself in my mind, often in unexpected ways. I found myself making connections I would never have made before, understanding concepts that had previously seemed incomprehensible to me. But with this knowledge also came great responsibility. I knew I had been sent back for a purpose. The revelation about the spiritual portal that would open on August 23, 2024, weighed on my mind constantly. How could I prepare people for something so monumental without sounding like a lunatic? I decided I needed to be strategic. I began studying intensely, not only to better understand what I had learned, but also to find ways to translate that knowledge into terms that people could understand and accept. I immersed myself in books on quantum physics, philosophy, spirituality, and history. Surprisingly, much of what I read felt familiar, as if I were just recalling things I already knew. It was as if the experience in the dimensionless library had planted seeds of knowledge in my mind, and now those seeds were germinating. I began to make connections between different fields of study, seeing patterns and relationships that had previously escaped me. It was fascinating, but also a little scary. Sometimes I felt overwhelmed by all this knowledge, like my mind was constantly operating at a higher level than I was used to. At the same time, I struggled with practical issues. How could I use this knowledge to help people? How could I prepare them for the changes that would come with the opening of the spiritual portal? And perhaps most importantly, how could I do this without being seen as crazy or a charlatan? I decided to start slowly. I started participating in discussion groups about spirituality and expanded consciousness. In these environments, I found people more open to unconventional ideas. I shared parts of my experience, but always carefully, without revealing everything at once. Surprisingly, I discovered that many people had had similar experiences, although perhaps not as intense or detailed as mine. Meeting these people was a relief. Finally, I didn't feel so alone. But there were still challenges. My family, although loving and supportive, had difficulty accepting my new perspective on life. My closest friends noticed the change in me, and not everyone reacted well. Some walked away, uncomfortable with my new interest in spiritual and metaphysical matters. And then there was the question of the date, August 23, 2024. As time passed, I felt a growing urgency. I knew I needed to do more, reach more people. But how to do this without sounding alarmist or fanatical? I decided I needed to find a balance. I started writing, first on a personal blog, then in articles for magazines specializing in spirituality and consciousness. It did not directly mention the date or the spiritual portal, but it spoke about the need to raise our consciousness to prepare for significant changes that were to come. Little by little, I started to build a network of people interested in my ideas. I organized small study and meditation groups. I have given talks at holistic centers and wellness events. Whenever possible, he incorporated the knowledge he had received, but in a way that people could relate to their own lives and experiences. However, despite all this progress, I sometimes felt frustrated. There was so much I wanted to share, so much that people needed to know, and time seemed to be passing too quickly. The date approached, and I feared I wasn't doing enough. In moments of doubt, I remembered the feeling of peace and love I experienced in the presence of the entity of light. It gave me the strength to keep going, to move forward even when things seemed difficult. I knew the road ahead of me was still long and full of challenges, but I also knew I wasn't alone on this journey. Somehow I felt like I was being guided, that every step I took was part of a bigger plan. And so, day after day, I continued, sharing, learning, preparing myself and others for what was to come. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was necessary. After all, it wasn't just about me or my experience. It was about the future of humanity. As the years passed, my mission became clearer and clearer. It wasn't just about sharing a personal experience, however extraordinary it was. It was about preparing humanity for a fundamental shift in our collective reality. The knowledge I received during my near-death experience was not static. It was like a seed that continued to grow and develop in my mind. The more I studied and meditated on what I had learned, the deeper my understanding became. I began to understand that the opening of the spiritual portal on August 23, 2024, would not be an isolated event. It was part of a larger process of evolution of human consciousness, a process that was already underway, although most people didn't realize it. I realized that my role was not just to announce what was coming, but to help people prepare on a deeper level. This meant working not only on intellectual knowledge, but also on spiritual and emotional development. I started organizing retreats and workshops focused on expanding consciousness. I taught meditation techniques and spiritual practices that I had learned during my journey. Whenever possible, I incorporated the knowledge I received in the Dimensionless Library, translating it into practical terms that people could apply in their everyday lives. One of the most important things I learned was the importance of love and compassion. In the presence of the entity of light, I experienced an unconditional love that transcended anything I had ever felt before. I understood that this love was the most powerful force in the universe, capable of transforming individuals and entire societies. So in all my interactions and all my teachings, I emphasized the importance of love. Not the romantic or familial love we know, but a universal love, a love that connects us to all beings and all of creation. As my work expanded, I began to attract the attention of people from different areas. Scientists interested in my understanding of quantum reality, spiritual leaders intrigued by my visions of the future. Even some politicians and business leaders were curious about the implications of the changes I predicted. But with this increased attention came new challenges. There were those who tried to discredit my work, labeling me a charlatan or religious fanatic. Others tried to co-opt my message for their own ends, twisting what I said to suit their agendas. I learned to navigate these turbulent waters with care and discernment. I stuck to what I knew to be true, even when it was difficult or unpopular. At the same time, I remained open to dialogue and new perspectives, recognizing that my understanding, as deep as it was still limited. As the date of August 23, 2024 approached, I felt an intensification of energy around me. It was as if the universe itself was preparing for a great change. I began to have vivid dreams and visions during meditation, showing me glimpses of what was to come. I saw a world in transformation, people awakening to new realities, developing skills that we would previously consider impossible. I saw challenges too, conflicts, confusion, fear of the unknown. But most of all, I saw hope. A radiant hope for a future where humanity would finally realize its true potential. I intensified my efforts to reach as many people as possible. I wrote books, gave interviews, used social media to spread my message. It wasn't about creating fear or panic, but about inspiring people to open up to new possibilities, to prepare for an unprecedented expansion of consciousness. As I did this, I stayed focused on my own spiritual practice. I meditated daily, connecting with that source of love and wisdom I experienced during my near-death experience. This kept me balanced and focused, even in the most challenging moments. As the days passed and the date approached, I felt a mix of emotions. Excitement for what was to come, apprehension about how the world would react, gratitude for being chosen to play this role, and above all, a deep sense of purpose. I knew that no matter what happened on August 23, 2024, nothing would be the same. The world was about to change in a fundamental and irreversible way. and I was ready to face whatever came, confident in the knowledge I had received and the love I had experienced. The future was coming, and I was determined to do everything I could to ensure that humanity was ready to welcome it with open arms. Today is August 20th, 2024, just 3 days before the date that has dominated my thoughts for so many years. The atmosphere around me is thick with expectation, like the air before a great storm. Over the past few months, the intensity of my work has reached levels I never imagined I would be able to sustain. Talks, interviews, counseling sessions, my days have been a constant race to reach as many people as possible before the big event. The world around me seems to be in a state of upheaval, not just because of my work, but because many others are also sensing that something significant is about to happen. I have received reports of people around the globe experiencing vivid dreams, inexplicable visions, sensations of impending change. The scientific community is in an uproar. Over the past few months, there have been a series of unexplained discoveries and events that seem to confirm much of what I have been saying over the years. Quantum anomalies, unusual atmospheric phenomena, even subtle changes in Earth's magnetic field. All of these seem to point to something big approaching. At the same time, there is a climate of tension and uncertainty. Many are frightened by the unknown, resisting the idea of such a fundamental change in our reality. There have been protests, heated debates in the media, even some isolated conflicts. Through it all, I stay focused on my purpose. Each morning, I wake up before sunrise to meditate. In these quiet hours, I reconnect with the peace and love I experienced during my journey on the other side. This gives me strength to face the challenges of the day. Today, as I prepare for another day of activities, I feel a mix of emotions. There is excitement, of course, at the proximity of the event I have been waiting for so long. But there is also a deep sense of responsibility. I know many people are looking to me for guidance and comfort in this time of uncertainty. I reflect on the journey that brought me here, the accidents that almost took my life, the extraordinary experience that changed everything, the years of preparation and tireless work. It all seems to have been part of a bigger plan, preparing me for this moment. As I get dressed, I look out the window and see the sun rising over the horizon. It's a new day, perhaps one of the last days of the world as we know it. But I don't feel afraid. On the contrary, I feel a deep peace and positive expectation. I know that what lies ahead will not be easy. The opening of the spiritual portal will bring changes that many will find difficult to accept or understand. There will be confusion, resistance, perhaps even conflict. But I also know that it is a necessary step in our evolution as a species. I take out my calendar and review the day's appointments. Interviews, a talk to a group of world leaders, counseling sessions with people who are struggling to deal with the intense energies of this time. It will be a long and challenging day, but I am ready. Before leaving, I stop for a moment and close my eyes. I visualize the world I saw in my visions, a world of greater consciousness, of deeper connection, of realized human potential, a world transformed by the love and understanding I experienced on the other side. I open my eyes, take a deep breath, and go out to face the day. The future is coming, and I'm here to help welcome it. Whatever comes, I'm ready. We are ready. And so, with a heart full of hope and determination, I take another step into the unknown, confident that no matter what happens on August 23rd, humanity will emerge stronger, wiser, and more united. The dawn of a new era is coming, and I feel privileged to be here to witness it.